The Featherlight district of Lumen Harbor did not just exist, it breathed. It was a sector of the station where the rigid, angular architecture of human engineering surrendered to the organic, flowing aesthetics of the Falari. Here, the walkways were not steel grates, but translucent bioglass that hummed with a soft amber warmth beneath one's boots. The overhead lights were not harsh industrial strips, but massive bioluminescent pods that hung like weeping willows, dripping soft photons in shades of lavender and mint. Tucked away in a quiet alcove of Sector 7, overlooking the grand observation deck that offered a panoramic view of the gas giant below, sat the Dream Garden. It was a tea shop that looked less like a business and more like a grown entity. The walls were woven from hardened coral wood, and the entrance was draped in silk moss that shivered whenever a customer approached. Inside, Celine moved with a grace that betrayed her exhaustion. She was a Falari, possessing the distinct tufted ears that twitched with every clink of a teacup, and a tail that swayed rhythmically behind her, acting as a barometer for her mood. Today, the tail was low, sweeping near the floor, a sign of melancholy that only her daughter Mira knew how to read properly. Celine looked younger than she was, her skin possessing a faint, iridescent sheen, typical of her people. But her eyes held the weight of 2 lifetimes. She poured a stream of star nectar tea into a delicate porcelain cup, the liquid shimmering like molten gold. "Here you are," she said softly, her voice melodic but guarded. "Steeped for exactly 5 minutes as you prefer." The customer, a young Falari male with overly groomed fur and a smile that was too wide, leaned in across the counter. "It tastes better when you pour it, Celine. You know there is a festival of lights next week in the Core Plaza. I have 2 passes." Celine did not flinch, but the air around her seemed to cool by a few degrees. She offered a polite, practiced smile, the kind that did not reach her eyes. "I am afraid I will be busy with inventory, but thank you. Please enjoy the tea." She turned away before he could press further, retreating to the safety of the back counter, where the steam from the massive copper samovars obscured her face. She wiped down a perfectly clean surface, her heart beating a steady rhythm of avoidance. It had been 7 years since Mira's father had left. 7 years since she had learned that love across species was a beautiful, fragile thing that shattered under the weight of judgment. The whispers of her neighbors still echoed in her memory, the way they had looked at her swollen belly with pity and disdain. She had frozen her heart that day, encasing it in ice as thick as the station's hull, deciding that her life would be simple: run, the shop, raise Mira, and never let anyone close enough to hurt them again. Behind the decorative screen that separated the living quarters from the shop, Mira was currently groaning into a datapad. Mira was 12 years old, a chaotic blend of Falari grace and human stubbornness. She had her mother's ears and tail, but her father's chaotic energy. Currently, she was lying upside down on the sofa, her tail flicking with irritation as she watched a holographic vlog titled, "How to Fix Your Mom's Love Life, a Guide for Desperate Daughters." Step 1, the overly enthusiastic vlogger chirped. Identify the problem. Is she too busy, or is she emotionally unavailable? Both, Mira muttered to the empty room. Definitely both. She rolled over, peering through the gap in the screen. She watched her mother wipe the counter for the 10th time in 10 minutes. Mira had seen Celine earlier that morning lingering by the window, watching a human couple walking hand in hand along the promenade. For a second, Celine's guard had dropped, revealing a yearning so raw it made Mira's chest ache. But the moment Celine realized Mira was watching, the mask slammed back into place, replaced by fussing over tea leaves and inventory lists. "She talks to the teapot more than she talks to people," Mira whispered. "This has to stop." Her fingers danced across her datapad, navigating to the local network's application store. Everyone at school was talking about Heartbeat Orbit, the new dating interface that connected residents across the station, based on psychometric compatibility and hobby algorithms. Mira bit her lip, her ears flattening in concentration. She had snapped a few photos of Celine earlier, candid shots, where the lighting from the gas giant outside cast a halo around her mother's profile. In the photos, Celine didn't look sad. She looked ethereal, mysterious, and devastatingly beautiful. Name, Celine. Age timeless, but actually 32. Likes rare tea blends, quiet mornings, people who do not talk loud. Dislikes bad manners, cold drafts, loneliness, even if she won't admit it. Mira hesitated at the final setting. There was a toggle for species preference. She looked at her mother's back again. The Falari men who came in were always so polite, so traditional, so boring. And they always made Selene tense. It was the humans with their messy lives and loud laughs that seemed to draw her mother's secret gaze. With a defiant tap, Mira selected priority visibility humans. Just to widen the net, she rationalized. More people means more fun. She hit publish. Almost instantly, the datapad pinged. Then, it pinged again. A cascade of notifications began to flood the screen. Mira's eyes widened. She tried to scroll through them, but her finger slipped. In her panic to manage the influx, she tapped a glowing gold button that said, Schedule Instant Meetup. The app interface swirled, trying to sync with the station's calendar system. Mira didn't know that Heartbeat Orbit had recently been acquired by the same mega-corporation that ran the station's utility maintenance grid. The servers were currently undergoing a merger, and the coding was notoriously buggy. A message popped up, match found. Coordinating schedule, synchronizing location request sent. Wait, what? Mira whispered frantically, tapping the cancel button. Who no stop? The screen flashed green, confirmed. Arrival in 20 minutes. Mira dropped the datapad. She scrambled to pick it up, but the deed was done. Someone was coming, 6 levels down in the grimy industrial heart of the engineering deck. Noah Hart was staring at a bundle of cables that offended him on a spiritual level. Noah was a tall man with broad shoulders that seemed permanently hunched, as if he were trying to make himself smaller. His hair was a dark, unruly mess that defied gravity, and combs alike in his coveralls were stained with coolant grease. He was 35 years old, though his knees felt 50. He reached out, his fingers twitching. The blue data cable was crossed over the red power line. It wasn't dangerous, not really, but it was wrong. It was an asymmetry in the universe. Without thinking, he pulled a zip tie from his belt, unhooked, the cable straightened it until it ran perfectly parallel to its neighbor, and secured it. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The hum of the generator next to him seemed to settle into a smoother rhythm. Dad, are you fixing the invisible things again? Noah jumped, turning to see his daughter Grace, sitting on a toolbox swinging her legs. Grace was 8, with sharp eyes behind oversized glasses and a missing front tooth that gave her a permanent, endearing lisp. I wasn't fixing it, Noah lied, wiping his hands on a rag. I was just optimizing it. Mom used to say you have a compulsion, Grace stated matter-of-factly, taking a bite of a nutrient bar. Noah flinched slightly at the mention of his ex-wife, but he covered it by checking his wrist tablet. It's not a compulsion, Gracie. It's attention to detail. The world is full of loose screws and crooked lines. Someone has to straighten them out. Because I can't straighten out anything else, he didn't add. Noah Hart was a man running from a noise. 7 years ago, he had been an elite resonant engineer, one of the few humans with a nervous system sensitive enough to hear the structural stress of deep space architecture. He could feel a microfracture in a hull before the sensors picked it up. But then came the collapse on the colony moon of Titan. He had heard the scream of the metal. He had tried to hold the resonant frequency to stabilize the bridge, but he hadn't been strong enough. The bridge fell. People died. Since then, Noah had buried his gift. He took jobs that were beneath his pay grade, fixing toilets, unclogging air filters, tightening bolts. He became invisible, a simple technician who just happened to be very, very lucky at guessing where the problems were. His tablet buzzed violently against his wrist. Urgent ticket. The screen flashed in red. Noah frowned. Usually, he got low-priority maintenance requests. This one was flagged as a critical hazard. Location: the Dream Garden Sector 7. Issue code: 8008L. Gas leak. Pressure valve failure. Notes: human interaction required immediately. High priority. Gas leak, Noah muttered, reading the corrupted text string. The code looked weird. Usually gas leaks were code 9000, but the description was clear enough. Human interaction required. That usually meant the Filari owners didn't have the right biometric clearance to reset the human-made valves. Is it another toilet? Grace asked, hoping for a no. Worse. Potential leak at a tea shop, Noah said, grabbing his heavy toolkit. He looked at Grace. It was her school holiday and the daycare center was closed for decontamination due to a glitter lice outbreak. He had no choice. Grab your helmet, kiddo. You're coming with me. Do they have cookies? It's a tea shop. They probably have tea biscuits. Acceptable, Grace declared, hopping off the toolbox. They made their way through the transit tubes. Noah walked with a distracted purpose. As they passed a row of advertising holograms, he paused mid-stride to nudge a projector that was slightly askew, aligning the image perfectly with the frame. He didn't even stop walking as he did it. The translation bug in the system was a masterpiece of digital incompetence. Mira's request for a hot human date had been routed through the linguistic parser, which interpreted hot as thermal danger human, as the required technician species, and date as a scheduled appointment. The dating app's urgent desire for connection became the maintenance system's urgent structural integrity risk. When Noah arrived at the Featherlight District, he felt out of place. The air here was thicker, perfumed with exotic spices and ozone. The soft biological lighting made his heavy gray worksuit look abrasive and ugly. He checked the address. The Dream Garden. The shop was beautiful. Too beautiful for a guy like him to be entering, unless something was broken. He stopped at the entrance. Hanging above the door was a complex wind chime made of hollow bone and crystal. It was a traditional Filari greeting instrument designed to sing when the door opened. But it was hanging crooked. The left string had slipped, causing the chimes to cluster together, muting their sound. Noah stood there. His hand twitched. "Dad," Grace warned. "We are here for the gas." "It will only take a second," Noah whispered. "It's choking the sound." He reached up. His large, rough hands moved with surprising delicacy. He adjusted the slipknot, rebalancing the counterweight. He tapped the center chime gently. The instrument swung freely, letting out a pure, crystalline chord that harmonized perfectly with the ambient hum of the district. Noah exhaled a visible tension leaving his shoulders. There. Better. Inside the shop, Celine froze. She had been wiping a table near the window. She had watched customers enter and exit this shop for 10 years. Every single one of them pushed past the chime, ignoring it, or batting it aside if it hit their head. But this man, this tall, disheveled human with the sad posture, had stopped. He hadn't just looked at it. He had listened to it. He had fixed it with a tenderness she hadn't seen in a decade. Her heart did a traitorous little flip. "Stop it," she scolded herself. "He is probably just obsessive." The door slid open. The chime sang its new, perfect song. Noah stepped in, holding a heavy scanning device that looked vaguely like a weapon to the untrained eye. He pulled his safety goggles down around his neck. Grace marched in beside him, holding a tin of half-eaten crackers she had brought from home. Mira, who had been hiding behind the counter praying for a miracle, peeked out. She saw a human male, tall, dark hair, kind of rugged in a "I don't care about my appearance" way. And he had brought a child, oh my stars. Mira thought her tail fluffing up to twice its size. Is he a single dad? That is double points on the compatibility chart. She rushed forward, nearly tripping over her own feet. "Welcome, you must be," she faltered. She didn't know his name. The app hadn't given it before she crashed the screen. You must be the appointment. Noah blinked, looking down at the small cat girl. Yes, the ticket. I got the alert about 20 minutes ago. I came as fast as I could. Celine approached them, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked from Mira's manic grin to Noah's serious expression. Appointment? Celine asked, her brow furrowing. I didn't call for a service. Noah looked at his tablet, then at Celine. For a second, his breath hitched. The holographic photos in the station directory didn't do Falari justice, or maybe it was just her. Her eyes were the color of a nebula swirling with violet and silver. She looked soft in a way that made him want to stand between her and the sharp edges of the world. He shook his head, forcing himself back to professional mode. I have a priority ticket here, ma'am. Code 8008L. Leak detection. It says human interaction is required. He lifted his scanner. Have you smelled anything strange? Rotten egg sulfur? Or maybe I felt a dizziness. Celine blinked. A leak, no. The air scrubbers are working perfectly. Mira's eyes widened. She realized what was happening. The hot date was a maintenance guy. Or maybe the maintenance guy was the date. No, he was talking about gas. Oh, Mira squeaked, stepping between them. The leak? Yes. The, emotional leak. I mean the pipe in the back. It is very pressing. Grace tugged on Noah's sleeve. Dad, she is lying. Her pupil dilation suggests panic, not toxicity exposure. Hush, Grace, Noah muttered. He looked at Celine. Look, the system doesn't generate these tickets for no reason. If there is a pressure buildup in your lines, it could be dangerous. I just need to scan the perimeter. Better safe than sorry, right? Celine hesitated. She didn't want a human technician stomping around her delicate shop with heavy boots. But she remembered how he had fixed the chime. A man who fixed chimes probably wouldn't break teacups. Fine, Celine said, sighing. But please be careful. My equipment is vintage. I am always careful, Noah said seriously. I will help, Mira declared. I will show him the broken spot. She grabbed Noah's hand and tried to drag him toward the only empty table in the corner, which was definitely not where the pipes were. Actually, the main junction is usually behind the counter, Noah said gently, disengaging. Right. The counter, Mira laughed nervously. Where Mom is. Perfect. Noah moved behind the counter, the space cramped. He was painfully aware of how close he was to Celine. He could smell her scent like jasmine and static electricity. He raised his scanner, sweeping it over the copper samovars. So, Mira said, leaning on the counter and trying to sound casual, despite her tail thumping against the wood like a metronome. You brought a kid. That is bold for a first, visit. Babysitter fell through, Noah muttered, watching the readings. Normal radiation levels. Oxygen mix is optimal. This is weird. Do you like tea? Mira pressed. My mom makes the best tea. She is single, by the way. The tea is single origin, I mean. And the mom. Both are unattached. Celine dropped a spoon. It clattered loudly on the floor. Mira. Noah looked up confused. I like tea. I usually drink coffee, though. Keeps me awake for the double shifts. Coffee is just bean water for people who hate themselves, Grace chimed in from the front of the counter, where she was eyeing a jar of star candies. Grace, be polite, Noah corrected automatically, though he was distracted. He frowned at the wall behind Celine. He put the scanner down. He took off his glove. What are you doing? Celine asked, watching his bare hand hover inches from the wall structure. The scanner says everything is green, Noah said softly. But something is humming wrong. He placed his palm flat against the coral wood paneling. To anyone else, it was just a wall. To Noah, it was a symphony of vibrations. He closed his eyes. He could feel the station's heartbeat, the deep thrumming bass of the gravity generators, miles below the rapid staccato of the air recyclers. And there, right under his hand, a dissonance. A tiny, jagged rhythm. It wasn't a gas leak. It was a loose coupling in the hydraulic aesthetic dampener, the thing that kept the shop's floor from vibrating with the station's engines. It was a small thing, but if left alone for another month, it would have cracked the foundation. "You have a loose stabilizer bolt," Noah murmured, his eyes still closed. "About 6 inches deep. It is vibrating at 42 hertz. It is making the whole wall anxious." Celine stared at him. She couldn't hear anything, but the way he spoke, as if the wall had feelings, as if he was diagnosing a patient rather than a building, sent a shiver down her spine. "Anxious," Celine repeated. Noah opened his eyes, realizing how crazy he sounded. He pulled his hand back quickly. "I mean unstable. Mechanical resonance, I can fix it. I just need to tighten the secondary valve. It will stop the anxiety." He grabbed a wrench from his belt. He didn't need to open the wall. There was an external access port, hidden under the decorative molding. He found it, instinctively slotted the wrench in, and gave it a precise quarter-turn twist. Click. The subtle, almost imperceptible trembling of the floor that Celine had lived with for years, so long she had stopped noticing it, suddenly vanished. The silence in the shop became deeper, more restful. The tea in the cups stopped shivering. Celine gasped. She hadn't realized how much tension she had been holding in her body to compensate for that vibration until it was gone. "How did you know?" she whispered. Noah shrugged, looking embarrassed. "Lucky guess. Like I said, the ticket was weird, but the system is rarely 100% wrong." Mira looked between them, her eyes sparkling. "He didn't just fix the wall," she thought. "He fixed the vibe." "So," Mira clapped her hands. "Now that the life-threatening emergency is over, payment is required." "The station covers the maintenance cost," Noah said, tapping his tablet to close the ticket. "Not that payment," Mira said slyly. "We don't accept credits for special consultations. We accept tea drinking. Sit, both of you." "I really should be going," Noah said, checking the time. "Grace has homework and I have another round of checks in Sector 4. "1 cup," Celine said. Noah stopped. He looked at her. Celine's face was slightly flushed. She was surprised by her own voice. She never asked customers to stay. "You fixed the chime," she said, her voice quiet. "And you fixed the floor. No one has ever noticed the floor before. Please, as a thank you." Noah looked at his boots, then at Grace, who was already happily munching on a star candy Celine must have slipped her. Then he looked at Celine. For the first time in 7 years, the idea of sitting still didn't feel terrifying. "1 cup," Noah agreed. He sat down on the stool opposite the counter. It was a bit small for him, his knees bumping against the wood. Celine moved to the samovar, her movements fluid and purposeful. The tension in the room shifted from awkward confusion to something warmer, more tentative. Mira sat next to Grace, whispering conspiratorially, "Your dad is huge. Can he lift heavy things?" "He lifts the entire atmospheric scrubber sometimes," Grace bragged. "But he is afraid of spiders." "Noted," Mira whispered, tapping on her datapad. "Update profile strong, but sensitive. Spider-phobic." Celine placed a cup in front of Noah. "Moonflower blend. It helps with sensory overload." Noah took a sip. The flavor was subtle floral, but grounded with an earthy aftertaste. It washed over him, and for a moment the constant low-level noise of the station's structural stress that always rang in his ears seemed to dampen. "It's good," he said, and he meant it. "I am Celine," she said. "Noah. Noah Hart. And the little one. Grace." "I am Mira," the cat girl announced. "Future station administrator and current matchma manager. Shop manager." They sat there for a moment, a strange quartet in the glow of the biolights. The misunderstanding of the date still hung in the air, unspoken, but felt by Mira while the adults navigated the polite waters of gratitude. Noah watched Celine's hands as she cleaned a spoon. He noticed a small scar on her finger. He wondered how she got it. He wondered why a woman with eyes was running a shop called Dream Garden. He was just about to stand up to say thank you, and retreat back to his invisible life when the shop's internal speakers crackled to life. A robotic voice, calm but authoritative, echoed through the room. "Attention citizens! This is a Sector 7 security alert. Anomaly detected in the main promenade ventilation grid. Initiating standard containment protocol. All blast doors are sealing. Please remain in your current location. Lockdown estimated duration 30 minutes. Clang. A heavy, transparent blast shield slid down over the front door of the shop, sealing them in. The ambient hum of the street outside was cut off, leaving them in a sudden, intimate silence. Noah froze, half standing. He looked at the door, then back at Celine. "Well," Celine said, her tail twitching with a mix of nerves and amusement. "It looks like you are having a second cup, Noah Hart." Mira and Grace looked at each other and high-fived under the table. The door was locked. The world outside was shut away. For the next 30 minutes, the technician who fixed everything but himself and the tea maker, who poured warmth for everyone but herself, had nowhere to run. The blast shield had sealed the shop with a finality that felt disproportionate to the calm synthetic voice announcing the routine safety check. Outside, the vibrant amber and violet lights of the Featherlight District were muffled behind the heavy translucent alloy, turning the world into a blur of watercolor shapes. Inside, the silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic bubbling of the copper samovars. "Routine check," the automated voice repeated pleasantly. "Please remain calm. Estimated duration is 30 minutes. It was not a crisis, but it was an intimacy. 4 people who barely knew one another were now contained within 400 square feet of coral wood and scented steam. Celine exhaled her tail, swaying low with a mix of resignation and practiced hospitality. She moved behind the counter, her hands automatically reaching for a fresh canister. "Well," she said, her voice smoothing over the awkward tension in the room. "In Falari culture, to wait without tea is to invite the dust of boredom into the soul. Since we cannot leave, I might as well serve something suitable for a lockdown." "Is it safe?" Noah asked, glancing at the blast shield. He was standing awkwardly by the toolbox, looking like a giant in a dollhouse. "The ventilation grid, I mean." "The system is just jittery," Celine replied, measuring out dried leaves that sparkled with a faint, blue luminescence. "The station sensors in this sector are old. Sometimes they mistake a dense cloud of pollen from the hanging gardens for a chemical variance. Please sit." Noah hesitated, then folded his long frame onto one of the stools again. Grace and Mira had already colonized the low table near the window, the initial shock of the lockdown having instantly evaporated in favor of a new game involving stacking sugar cubes. Celine placed a steaming cup in front of Noah. It was not the moonflower blend from before. This one was darker, smelling of deep earth and rain. "Iron root," she explained. "It grounds the spirit." Noah wrapped his large, scarred hands around the delicate cup. The heat seeped into his palms. He took a sip. The taste was robust, anchoring him, but it was the after effect that startled him. As the warm liquid traveled down his throat, the constant, low-level static that plagued his mind, the relentless auditory feedback of the station's structural groans, suddenly harmonized. For a resident like Noah, living on Lumen Harbor was like living inside a drum kit that was constantly being played by an arrhythmic toddler. Every rivet, every beam, every pressurized pipe sang a song of tension and load. He had learned to tune it out, to bury it under layers of mental white noise, but it was always there. A headache that never quite formed a fatigue, that never quite lifted. But as the iron root tea hit his system, the chaotic noise of the dream garden's walls smoothed out. The vibrating floor joists, the humming light fixtures, the microscopic expansion of the blast shield, they all aligned into a single, pleasant chord. It was quiet. Truly blessed quiet. Noah blinked, his pupils dilating. He set the cup down a little too hard. "Whoa," he breathed. Celine paused in the middle of wiping a saucer. She looked at him with keen interest. "Too strong. It can be bitter to human palates." "No," Noah said quickly, rubbing his temple. No, it is incredible. It is like someone just walked into the control room of my brain and adjusted the equalizer settings. The treble is down. The bass is up. Everything is clear. You speak of your mind like it is a machine, Celine observed softly. Sometimes it feels like one, Noah admitted, then caught himself. He was revealing too much. He forced a lopsided grin. Or maybe I just really needed the caffeine. This tea could fix a cracked hull, I bet. Celine smiled, a genuine small thing that made the corner of her eyes crinkle. It is meant to fix cracks in the mood, not the hull. But I am glad it helps. Over at the low table, the conversation between the children had shifted from sugar cubes to sociology. So, Grace said, adjusting her glasses as she placed a cube precariously on top of a tower. You go to the Orbital Academy in Sector 4, the one with the anti-gravity gym. Yes, Mira replied, her ears flicking back. It is okay, but the uniforms are terrible. They don't account for tails. I have to cut a hole in every skirt, and then the fabric phrase, and the teachers send notes home about uniform code violations. I get notes too, Grace said matter-of-factly, but mine are for correcting the teacher. Last week, Miss Halloway said the station produces gravity through rotation. I told her that was archaic, and that we actually use a localized graviton displacement field generated by the core singularity. She gave me a detention. Mira giggled, covering her mouth. You did not. I did. Accuracy is important. Grace looked at Mira's twitching ears. Do the kids pull them? Mira stopped giggling. She touched the tip of her left ear. Sometimes. The human kids. They think it is funny to see them swivel. They ask if I can hear colors. Can you? No, that is stupid. But I can hear when they are whispering mean things 3 rows away. Mira's face darkened slightly. Is that why you are here, because your dad is working? Where is your mom? The question hung in the air, sharp and innocent. At the counter, Noah stiffened. Celine's hands stopped moving. Grace didn't flinch. She knocked the sugar tower over on purpose. Mom is on Mars. She is a terraforming geologist. She said she needed planetary-scale challenges, and apparently Dad and I were only domestic-scale challenges. They divorced 2 years ago. Mira's eyes widened. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. My dad left too, but he didn't go to Mars. He just went to Sector 1. That is the rich part. He married a pure-blood Filari woman from a high house. Why? Grace asked. Because Mom is a shopkeeper, Mira said, glancing toward the counter to ensure Celine wasn't looking, though Celine was hearing every word. And because she liked humans. The Filari elders didn't like that. They said she was diluting the heritage. So he left before I was born. Well, right after. Grace nodded slowly, processing this data. So both our parents have abandonment data points in their history logs. Yeah, Mira sighed. It sucks. It is suboptimal, Grace agreed. But at least your mom makes good tea. My dad burns toast. We eat a lot of ration bars. At the counter, the silence between the adults was thick, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the heavy, shared silence of 2 people who had just heard their hearts walking around outside their bodies, talking about their scars. Celine stared into her cup. The steam swirled in complex patterns. She talks too much, Celine murmured, her voice tight. I tell her not to discuss family business. They are just kids, Noah said gently. He traced the rim of his cup. They see things simpler than we do. X happened then, Y happened. Cause and effect. It was not simple, Celine said, and suddenly the words were spilling out, perhaps loosened by the lockdown, perhaps by the way Noah had fixed her chime. He was a good man at first, a human architect. He loved the curvature of Filari aesthetics. We thought that love was a structure you could build anywhere. She looked up at the bioluminescent lights. But structures need foundations, and the foundation here in the Featherlight District is tradition. His family on Earth stopped calling. My family here stopped inviting us to the Feast of Suns. The isolation, it wears you down. It is like a slow leak. One day he just packed his bags. He said he couldn't breathe anymore. She looked at Noah, her eyes defiant but wet. He left me with a shop, a baby, and a community that said, "We told you so." I swore I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me break again. And I swore I would never let Mira feel like she wasn't enough. Noah listened. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't say, "He was a jerk," or "You deserve better." He just nodded, absorbing the frequency of her pain. "My wife," Noah said, his voice rough. "She didn't leave because of pressure. She left because I changed. After the accident on Titan, I stopped being the man who wanted to build great things. I became the man who was terrified that everything would fall down. She couldn't live with someone who was always waiting for the ceiling to collapse." He looked at Celine. "We are both just trying to keep the roof up, Celine." Celine looked at him. Really looked at him. For a moment, the barrier between species, the history of hurt, the skepticism, it all thinned. "Attention, citizens," the robotic voice chimed, shattering the moment. "Atmospheric variance resolved. Lockdown lifted. Thank you for your cooperation." The blast shield hissed and retracted. The noise of the district, the laughter, the distant thrusters, the music rushed back in. The spell was broken. Noah stood up abruptly, reverting to his awkward technician persona. "Right. Well, 30 minutes is up. I should get Grace home. School night." "Of course," Celine said, smoothing her apron, her face composing itself back into the mask of the polite shopkeeper. "Thank you for the company, and for fixing the wall." "It was just a loose bolt," Noah mumbled. "Come on, Grace." Grace hopped off her chair, brushing sugar dust from her knees. "Bye, Mira. See you on the net." "Bye." Mira waved her tail, drooping slightly, as the two humans walked out. When they were gone, Celine stood in the doorway. She watched Noah's broad back receding down the walkway. She saw him pause at a flickering street lamp. He didn't stop walking, but his hand shot out, slapping the access panel on the pole. The flicker stopped instantly, the light burning steady and true. Celine touched her chest. Her heart was beating a rhythm she hadn't felt in a very long time. It terrified her. The walk back to the human residential sector was a transition between worlds. The soft, living curves of the Filari district gave way to the brutalist, efficient steel of the human zones. Noah held Grace's hand. His mind was still buzzing from the tea, or perhaps from the conversation. He felt exposed. He hadn't spoken about Titan to anyone in years, certainly not to a stranger with violet eyes. As they passed a main support pylon near the transit hub, Noah felt it. A dissonance. A subtle grinding vibration in the floor plates that no one else seemed to notice. Commuters rushed past, ignoring the faint thump, thump, thump that echoed up through Noah's boots. It was a misalignment in the magnetic levitation rails below the deck. A deviation of maybe 2 millimeters. Without breaking stride, Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a multi-tool. He knelt down, as if tying his shoelace. He jammed the tool into a maintenance slot on the floor, twisted the torque setting to maximum, and gave it a hard wrench to the right. Clunk. The vibration vanished. The floor became solid silent. "You did it again," Grace said, looking down at him. "Shoelace," Noah said, standing up. "You wear magnetic boots, Dad. They don't have laces." "Metaphorical shoelace," Noah said. "Let's go home." Over the next 2 weeks, the algorithm that governed the station's maintenance assignments began to display a statistical anomaly. The central computer, an AI tasked with optimizing efficiency, noticed that ticket resolution time in Sector 7 dropped by 40% whenever technician Noah Hart was assigned to the area. Furthermore, preventative maintenance scores, problems fixed before they were reported, skyrocketed. The AI, logical and unfeeling, did what it was programmed to do. It assigned Noah to Sector 7 more often. Noah found himself spending his mornings in the Featherlight District. He fixed hydration pumps in the hanging gardens. He recalibrated the bioluminescence in the public squares. And inevitably, his path always seemed to loop past the dream garden. Mira was helping the algorithm along. "Mom, the chair is squeaking again," Mira shouted one Tuesday afternoon. "It is a wooden chair, Mira. It squeaks," Celine replied from the kitchen. "It is a sonic disturbance," Mira insisted, already tapping on her datapad. She had figured out how to use the public reporting interface. Ticket submitted, excessive auditory friction. Priority medium. 20 minutes later, Noah appeared at the door, toolbox in hand, looking sheepish. "I got a ticket about a sonic disturbance," he asked. Celine sighed, shooting a glare at Mira, who was innocently doing homework. "I am sorry, Noah. My daughter believes that physics is negotiable." "I can take a look," Noah said. "Since I am here." He oiled the chair. Then he tightened the hinges on the back door. Then he adjusted the pressure in the espresso machine, which admittedly had been hissing threateningly for months. It became a rhythm, a routine. Noah would work. Celine would pour tea, always a different blend, always checking his reaction. They would talk. They didn't talk about deep trauma anymore. They talked about the mundane things that make up a life. "The academy tuition is going up again," Noah said one day, leaning under the sink to fix a drain. "I might have to pick up extra shifts in the recycling plant." "The price of star nectar leaves has doubled," Celine countered, wiping the counter above him. "The transport ships from the surface are being taxed by the trade guild. I might have to raise prices, but the regulars will complain." "They won't complain," Noah said, his voice echoing from inside the cabinet. "Your tea is the only thing keeping half this sector sane." Celine smiled at the cabinet doors. "And you are the only one keeping this sector from falling apart, apparently. The walkway outside used to rattle when the heavy cargo haulers went by. It stopped last week." Noah slid out from under the sink, wiping grease from his cheek. "It was just a loose dampener." "You say everything is just a loose something," Celine said softly. "You never take credit." "In my line of work, if you are noticed, it means something broke," Noah said. "Ideally, I should be invisible." "I see you," Celine said. The air in the shop grew heavy, charged with a sudden, terrified awareness. Noah froze, the wrench in his hand forgotten. Celine held her breath, her tail still. The bell chimed. An elderly Falari walked in. He was tall, draped in robes of deep indigo, woven with living vines. His fur was silver with age, and his presence sucked the warmth out of the room instantly. Elder Kethar. Celine stiffened her posture, shifting from relaxed to rigid respect. "Elder Kethar, honor your path." Noah scrambled to his feet, feeling large and clumsy in his dirty coveralls. He nodded respectfully. Kethar ignored Noah entirely. He moved to the counter with a slow, deliberate grace. "Celine, the preparation for the solstice performance is the ceremonial brew ready." "It is fermenting, Elder. It will be ready by the weekend," Celine replied, her voice steady, but devoid of the warmth she showed Noah. Kethar nodded. He turned his head slowly, his yellow eyes landing on Noah. He looked at the human, not with hatred, but with the detached dismissal one might show a stray animal. "The pipes in this district are old," Kethar said smoothly. "They sing a song of history. It requires a delicate touch to maintain them, a native touch." "Mr. Hart is a very skilled technician," Celine said, stepping slightly in front of Noah. "He has fixed issues that have plagued the shop for years." Kethar smiled, a thin stretching of lips. "Humans are often skilled at fixing things they do not understand. But they rarely stay, do they? They treat Lumen Harbor like a transit station. They get bored of the humidity, or the strange lights, or the people who do not look like them. They leave." He leaned in closer. "The roots of the Falari reject foreign soil, Celine. You remember this lesson." It was a polite, soft-spoken knife to the gut. Noah clenched his jaw. He wanted to say that he wasn't going anywhere. He wanted to say that he understood the pipes better than Kethar ever could. But the shame of his past, the bridge that fell, the failure choked him. Who was he to argue he was broken? Maybe he was just a tourist in this life. "I have another ticket to close," Noah said quietly. "Excuse me." He walked out, past the elder, past Celine's outstretched hand, that dropped before it touched him. Noah didn't go to his next ticket. He went down. He took the service elevator to the sublevels beneath the Featherlight District. This was where the station's artificial gravity plating met the biological superstructure that the Falari had grafted onto the station's hull. They called it the Song Spine. It was a massive spiraling lattice of semi-sentient coral and biopolymer that ran through the spine of Sector 7. It distributed heat, recycled air, and stabilized the sector against the gas giant's gravity well. It was the heart of the Falari district. Noah stood on the maintenance gantry, looking at the glowing, pulsing structure. It was beautiful, and it was screaming. To anyone else, it was silent. But to Noah, the song spine was emitting a low, discordant moan. It was a D minor chord that kept slipping into a flat E. It sounded like a violin string stretched to the breaking point. He pulled out his diagnostic tablet. "Record," he commanded. He placed his sensors on the lattice. The readings came back normal. Structural integrity 98%. Stress levels nominal. "No," Noah whispered. "You are lying." He closed his eyes. He reached out with his senses, letting the resonance of the structure wash over him. He felt it, a micro-tremor, deep in the root system near the junction with the main station hull. It wasn't a break yet. It was a harmonic dissonance. The two technologies, human steel and Falari coral, were vibrating at different frequencies, fighting each other instead of dancing together. If it continued, the coral would shatter. Noah spent 3 hours mapping the dissonance. He drafted a report detailed and precise. He proposed a solution, a series of micro-adjustments to the magnetic dampeners that would synchronize the frequencies. It was a delicate operation, one that required a conductor, not just a mechanic. He hit submit. Ticket filed. Priority assessment calculating. The screen flashed. Status low, priority. Reason simulation models show no structural risk. Recommendation ignored. Ticket closed. Noah stared at the screen. He punched the metal railing. "It is not about the simulation," he shouted to the empty room. "It is about the song." But the machine didn't care about songs, and the Falari elders didn't care about human technicians. 3 days later, Noah was sitting in his small apartment, helping Grace with her math homework. He was distracted. The hum of the song spine was getting louder in his head, a distant toothache that wouldn't go away. His tablet chimed. A priority message. He frowned. It wasn't from the maintenance dispatch. The sender ID was encrypted with a symbol he recognized from old textbooks, a stylized tree root intertwined with a gear. To Technician N. Hart, from the Root Keepers Guild subject, regarding anomalous report. Alpha. Mr. Hart. We have reviewed your dismissed maintenance logs regarding the harmonic dissonance in Sector 7. While the central computer ignores feelings, we do not. Your analysis of the song spine matches observations made by our own listeners, though yours lacks the mystical terminology. You hear it, don't you? We request a meeting. We need to understand how a human maintenance worker hears the weeping of the roots. Time: 19:00 hours. Saturday. Location: Sublevel 4. The Grotto. Noah stared at the message. The Root Keepers were a semi-mythical group of engineers and bioarchitects who maintained the deep systems. To be summoned by them was unheard of for a surface-level worker. Then his eyes drifted to the calendar on the wall. Saturday, 19th of Wintro hours. Grace had drawn a big red heart around the date. Celine's tea ceremony performance. Mira had sent him an official invite 3 times. Celine had shyly mentioned that she was unveiling a new blend and would save a seat in the front row. Noah looked at the Rootkeeper message. This was his chance. If he met them, he could explain the danger. He could finally be useful, finally use the gift that had been a curse for so long. He could save the sector. But if he went, he would miss Celine's big moment. He would be just another human who didn't show up, just another man who left. He looked at Grace, who was chewing on her pencil. "Grace," Noah said, "if you had to choose between fixing a very big problem or keeping a promise to a friend, what would you do?" Grace looked up. "Is the problem going to explode?" "Eventually, maybe." "Is the friend going to be sad?" "Yes," Grace thought about it. "Can you fix the problem after the friend is happy? Or is the explosion imminent?" "It is not imminent," Noah admitted. "It is a slow break." "Then go to the friend," Grace said firmly. "Calculated risk. Emotional damage is immediate. Structural damage is delayed." Noah smiled. He ruffled her hair. "You are too smart for 8. He tapped the reply button on the tablet. "To Rootkeeper's re-meeting, I will be there. But I have a prior engagement at 19:00. I can meet at 20:30. If the Roots are weeping, they can wait 90 minutes for a cup of tea." He hit send. He didn't know it then, but that decision to choose the tea shop over the secret guild would put him exactly where he needed to be, and exactly where Elder Kethar didn't want him. The song spine hummed beneath his feet, waiting for its conductor. And in the dream garden, Celine was pressing a robe for the ceremony, wondering if the empty chair in the front row would stay empty. The sub-level meeting room smelled of ozone and damp earth, a scent that existed only where the sterile ventilation of the human sectors met the sweating, breathing bioarchitecture of the Falari districts. It was a small, cramped space, tucked behind a massive heat exchanger, vibrating with a low frequency that rattled the teeth of anyone not accustomed to the deep bowels of Lumen Harbor. Noah Hart sat on a crate, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. Across from him sat the Root Keepers. They were an odd coalition. There was Halloway, a human structural engineer, with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints, and beside him sat Elder Vile, a Falari, whose fur had turned the color of dried moss. They were not politicians. They were the caretakers of the station's bones. "Look at the data, Noah," Halloway said, sliding a data pad across the scarred metal table. "Just look at it." Noah looked. It was a graph of the song spine's harmonic stability over the last 6 months. The line was jagged, erratic, a visual representation of a structure in distress. But there were plateaus, periods of absolute serene stability, where the line smoothed out into a perfect horizon. "These flat lines," Vale said, her voice sounding like dry leaves rustling together. "They correspond exactly to your shifts in Sector 7. Every single time you walk the perimeter, the spine calms down." "I am just tightening bolts," Noah said, his voice tight. "I am just fixing loose couplings." "You are tuning it," Vile corrected gently. "You are not just stopping the rattle. You are finding the resonance. You adjusted the hydraulic dampeners on the Dream Garden walkway by 0.04%. Why that specific number?" "Because that is where it stopped screaming," Noah muttered, looking at the floor. Halloway leaned forward. "That is the point, son. The central computer recommends adjustments based on math. You are making adjustments based on, well, we do not know what. But it works. The song spine is a living hybrid. It does not want a mechanic. It wants a partner." Vael placed a heavy hand on the table. "We want you to be the technical liaison for the Featherlight District. We need a bridge between the human maintenance crews and the Falari bioarchitects. Right now, they are fighting. The humans use steel where we need cartilage. We use coral where you need titanium. The station is tearing itself apart in slow motion. We need someone who speaks both languages." Noah felt the blood drain from his face. Liaison. That was a title. That was a position of authority. That was a spotlight. "I cannot," Noah said, standing up. The room suddenly felt too small. "I am a ticket pusher. I fix toilets and air conditioners. I do not do structural oversight." Not anymore. Because of Titan, Holloway asked softly. Noah flinched, as if struck. Because I know what happens when I trust my gut over the sensors. People die. I am not the man you want. I am just the guy who fixes the tea shop's door, because he likes the owner. The tea shop owner is part of this, Vielle said, her yellow eyes piercing. If the spine fractures, the Dream Garden is the first localized collapse zone. It sits directly on the primary junction. Noah froze. The image of Celine's shop, crumbling the coral wood, splintering the samovars, crushing the floor. It hit him with the force of a physical blow. We are announcing the new initiative tonight, Holloway said. At the cultural showcase. We were hoping to introduce you then. I have to go, Noah said, turning to the door. I am late for something. Think about it, Hart, Holloway called after him. You can hide in the dark, but the station is still going to break. While Noah was fleeing his destiny in the sublevels, Mira was busy rewriting it in her bedroom. The young Falari lay on her stomach, her tail thrashing with creative intensity. On her screen, the Heartbeat Orbit app was open. She had hacked well, guessing her mother's password was hardly hacking, since it was just Mira 123 into the event management system for the evening's gathering. Originally, the event was titled A Demonstration of Traditional Pouring Techniques, Quiet Reflection. Boring, Mira whispered. Snooze fest. No one is going to date a woman who hosts a quiet reflection. She tapped the screen, her fingers flying. New title. The Song of the Station, T-Vibration, and the Future of Lumen Harbor. Description. Join Celine, Mistress of the Dream Garden, and Special Guest of Honor. Noah Hart, the man who listens to walls, for a night of sensory awakening. Tags. Romance Engineering Mystery. Hot Dad Alien Tea. She hesitated on the Hot Dad tag, then deleted it. Too obvious. She replaced it with Structural Integrity. Perfect, she declared. She hit Update All Invites. The notification pinged out to 3,000 users in the Featherlight District. Now, Mira said, rolling off the bed. I need to find Grace. We have a propaganda campaign to launch. The plaza outside the Dream Garden had been transformed. Bioluminescent vines were draped over the railings, casting a soft aquatic glow over the gathering crowd. It was a mixed group Falari, in their flowing ceremonial robes, humans in off-duty casual wear, and a smattering of curious tourists. Celine stood on a raised dais in the center of the plaza. She wore a dress of shimmering silver fabric that looked like woven starlight. She looked regal, composed, and utterly terrified. She knelt behind a low table, arranging her tea tools with trembling hands. She had prepared for a quiet circle of 20 elders and enthusiasts. Instead, half the sector seemed to be here. Why are there so many people? Celine whispered to Mira, who was standing innocently by the stage steps. Maybe everyone really likes tea today, Mira lied, smoothly, adjusting her collar. Celine scanned the crowd. She wasn't looking for the elders. She was looking for a messy head of dark hair and a hunched posture. He wasn't there. A pang of disappointment, sharp and cold, pierced her chest. He said he would come, she thought. He promised. Begin, Celine, Elder Kethar's voice drifted from the front row. He sat on a high-backed chair, looking like a judge presiding over a sentencing. Do not keep the community waiting. Celine took a breath. She began the ritual. Her hands moved in fluid arcs, rinsing the leaves, pouring the water, turning the cups. It was a dance of silence and precision. The tea, Celine spoke, her voice projected by a small, acoustic amplifier, is not just water and leaf. It is the memory of the soil and the patience of the rain. In Lumen Harbor, where the ground is metal and the rain is recycled, we drink to remember that we are still organic beings. The crowd watched mesmerized. At the back of the plaza, in the shadows of a support pillar, Noah arrived. He was out of breath. He had run up 18 flights of stairs because the lift was too slow. He saw her. She looked like a queen from a forgotten legend. He meant to stay in the shadows. He meant to watch support her silently, and then slip away before anyone asked him to save the world. And to understand the organic nature of our home, Mira's voice suddenly rang out, amplified by the sound system she had hijacked. My mother has invited a special partner tonight. Celine froze the teapot, hovering mid-pour. She looked at her daughter with wide eyes. Please welcome, Mira shouted, pointing a spotlight directly at the back pillar. Noah Hart, the resident of Sector 7. The beam of light hit Noah like a physical slap. He blinded, raising a hand to shield his eyes. Mira, Celine hissed. Bring him up, a human worker in the crowd shouted. That is the guy who fixed the walkway. The Wall Whisperer, another Falari voice cheered. The crowd parted. Noah stood there exposed. He looked at Celine on the stage. She looked confused, but not angry. She looked relieved. He could turn around. He could run. But then he saw Grace standing next to Mira. His daughter was giving him a double thumbs up, mouthing the words, calculated risk. Noah sighed. He straightened his spine. He walked through the crowd, the sea of faces blurring, as he ascended the steps to the dais. I did not agree to this part of the program, Celine whispered, as he reached her side. Neither did I, Noah whispered back. Your daughter is dangerous. She gets it from her father, Celine said, a small smile touching her lips. The human one. Noah turned to face the crowd. The spotlight was hot. Elder Kethar was staring at him with undisguised contempt. I am not a public speaker, Noah began, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. I am a mechanic. Tell them about the song, Noah, Mira shouted from the side. Noah looked at his hands. He looked at the floor of the dais. He could feel it, the subtle vibration of the plaza deck, the hum of the power conduits beneath. This station, Noah said, his voice gaining a sudden quiet strength. It is loud. For most of you, it is just background noise. The air recyclers, the gravity plating the transit tubes. But for me, it is a choir. The crowd went silent. When I walk through the Feather Light District, Noah continued, forgetting the audience and speaking to the air itself. I hear the song spine. It is supposed to be a harmony, a C major chord of biological growth and structural steel. But lately, it has been singing in D minor. It is a sad song. It is the sound of two things holding hands, but pulling in opposite directions. He knelt down and touched the deck. Right here, 3 meters down. There is a coupling bolt that is rusted. It sings a scratchy, high-pitched note. It makes the coral around it itch. So the coral pulls away, and that creates a gap. That gap is where the cold comes in. He stood up and looked at the crowd. I don't fix things because I am a genius. I fix them because the noise keeps me awake. I fix them because if I don't, the song turns into a scream. And I have heard a station scream before. I never want to hear it again. Silence. Absolute heavy silence. Then slowly, a young Falari in the second row stood up. It was the shop assistant from the bakery next door. He is right, the youth said. The floor in my shop used to vibrate my scales off. He touched the wall once and it stopped. He listens. He listens, someone else shouted. Holloway and Elder Vale stepped out from the side of the stage. They hadn't planned the timing, but they were smart enough to ride the wave. Citizens of Lumen Harbor, Holloway announced, his voice booming. The route keepers confirm Mr. Hart's assessment. That is why tonight we are formally extending an invitation to Noah Hart to become the first joint resonance advisor for the song spine. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, and the stamping of feet. It was a wave of validation that washed over Noah, nearly knocking him over. He looked at Celine. She was beaming at him, her hands clapping softly, her eyes shining with pride. For a second, he felt like a hero. Then he looked at the front row. Elder Kethar stood up. He did not clap. He adjusted his robes, looked at Noah with eyes cold as vacuum, and turned his back. He walked out of the plaza, followed by a dozen other older Falari. Their silence cut through the applause like a knife. The euphoria of the moment, lasted exactly 45 minutes. By the time the reception started, the mood had shifted. The tea was served, the music played, but the whispers had begun. Lumen Harbor was a small town in a tin can, and small towns loved a scandal more than a hero. "Did you see how she looked at him?" a Falari matron whispered near the buffet table loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The advisor position, please. He is just a human grease monkey. He clearly got the job because he is servicing the tea mistress." "History repeats itself," another voice muttered. Celine always had a weakness for strays. First the architect, now the janitor. She is desperate for a father figure for that mongrel child of hers. Noah was standing near the edge of the crowd holding a cup of punch he didn't want. He heard them. His enhanced hearing, usually tuned to metal, and stone, picked up the jagged frequencies of malice with perfect clarity. He saw Grace standing by the dessert table. A group of human teenagers were snickering. "Hey, Grace," a boy with a cruel smirk said. "Is your dad going to fix my bike, or does he only fix things for alien ladies he meets on dating apps?" "My dad is a residence advisor," Grace said, her chin high, though her lip trembled. "He is a charity case," the boy laughed. "My mom says the Falari only hired him so they can pretend to be inclusive. It is a diversity hire, or a pity hire." Grace shoved the boy. It wasn't a hard shove, but he stumbled into the table, knocking over a tray of pastries. "Hey!" the boy shouted. Freak, across the room, Mira was faring no better. "Your mom is embarrassing," a Falari girl hissed, her ears flattened. "Invite a human to the stage, Elder Kether is furious. My parents say your family is a pollution to the sector. Your mom is just setting herself up to be dumped again." "Shut up," Mira snapped. "Noah is not like that." "They are all like that," the girl sneered. "Humans take what they want and leave. Watch. He will be gone in a month and you will just be the girl with the half-breed ears and the crying mother." Mira turned and ran. She pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face, disappearing into the dark alleyway beside the shop. Noah saw it all. He saw Grace's shaking shoulders. He saw Mira running. He saw the way the polite smiles of the adults didn't reach their eyes when they looked at Celine. The cold dread returned to his stomach. It wasn't the fear of the station collapsing. It was the fear of being the wrecking ball. "I did this," Noah thought. "I brought the spotlight and the spotlight burns." The plaza cleared out late. The bio lights dimmed to a sleep cycle. Noah stayed behind to help stack chairs. Celine was wiping down the dais, her movements slow and weary. The silence between them wasn't comfortable like it had been in the shop. It was thick with the things they had heard tonight. "Celine," Noah said. His voice echoed in the empty square. She stopped wiping. She didn't look up. "That was quite a night. Mira went to bed without dinner. Grace is asleep on the bench over there." "I heard what they were saying," Noah said. He walked closer to the stage, but he didn't climb up. He stayed on the ground looking up at her. "About you. About me. About why I got the offer." "People talk, Noah. They are bored and unhappy," Celine said, scrubbing a stain on the table harder than necessary. "It is not just talk. It is poison," Noah said. "Grace got into a fight. Mira ran away crying. Elder Kether looked at you like you were a traitor." "Kether is an old fossil," Celine snapped, finally looking up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "He is powerful," Noah countered. "And he is right about one thing. I am a disruption. I am a human technician who walked into your world and started rewriting the rules. And now, you and the girls are paying the price." "So," Celine challenged, stepping to the edge of the dais. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I cannot take the liaison job," Noah said. The words tasted like ash. "I will tell the route keepers tomorrow. I will decline. I will go back to the human sector, take the night shifts in the recycling plant. If I disappear, the rumors will stop. The heat will die down. You can go back to being the respected tea mistress." He thought he was being noble. He thought he was falling on the grenade to save her. He expected her to be relieved. He expected her to say, "Thank you, Noah. That is for the best." Instead, Celine laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound that had no humor in it. "You are going to run," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am protecting you," Noah pleaded. "No," Celine shouted. Her tail lashed violently, knocking a ceramic cup off the table. It shattered on the ground. "Do not dare call it protection. Call it what it is. Cowardice." Noah recoiled. "Celine, You are just like him," she said, her voice trembling with fury and grief. "Mira's father. He said the same thing. I am leaving to make it easier for you, Celine. I am leaving so they stop whispering about us." He thought he was a martyr. But he was just a man who was too scared to stand next to me when the wind got cold. She walked down the steps, advancing on him, until she was inches away. She poked a finger into his chest. "I stood on that stage tonight and I was proud of you," she hissed. "I thought, finally, here is a man who hears the truth and speaks it. But you only speak the truth to walls, don't you? When it comes to people, you are deaf." "I crashed a bridge," Noah shouted back, his control finally snapping. "I killed people because I was arrogant. I am not trying to run away. I am trying to stop history from repeating itself. If I stay, I will fail. And when I fail, I will take you down with me." "Then let us fall," Celine screamed. "At least we would be falling together. But you would rather leave me standing alone in the wreckage just so you can say your hands are clean." She stepped back, her chest heaving. She wiped a tear from her cheek furiously. "Go," she whispered. "If you want to decline the job, go. Go back to your invisible life. But do not come back here. I don't serve tea to ghosts." She turned and ran into the shop, the chime above the door, the chime he had fixed, singing a mournful, solitary note as she slammed the door behind her. Noah stood alone in the plaza. The biolights flickered above him. He listened. The song spine was still there deep beneath the deck. But for the first time in weeks, he couldn't hear the music. All he could hear was the shattering of the cup and the sound of a door closing between two worlds. He walked over to the bench, gently picked up the sleeping Grace, and began the long walk back to the human sector. The distance between Sector 7 and home had never felt so long. The days following the cultural showcase did not bring the glory of a new dawn. They brought the suffocating humidity of a storm that refused to break. The Featherlight District, usually a sanctuary of soft bioluminescence and gentle chimes, had transformed into a cage of whispers. News traveled faster than light on Lumen Harbor, especially when it concerned the transgression of social boundaries. The story of Noah Hart, the human grease monkey who had ascended to the right hand of the root keepers, had mutated. It was no longer a story about structural resonance or the saving of the song spine. It was a sordid tabloid headline, passed from datapad to datapad, embellished with every retelling. In the mess hall of Sector 4, where the human laborers gathered for processed coffee and gossip, Noah could feel the eyes on him. They were not eyes of admiration. "There he is," a welder whispered loudly to his companion. "The Romeo of the vents." "Must be nice," the companion sneered, stirring his coffee with a dirty spoon. "I have been applying for a promotion to Sector 7 for 3 years. Denied every time. Apparently I am using the wrong application forms. I should be using Heartbeat Orbit." Noah kept his head down, staring at his tray of gray nutrient mash. He gripped his fork so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to stand up and scream that he understood the tensile stress of a biopolymer beam better than anyone in the room. He wanted to explain the D minor chord of the station's agony. But he knew it would sound like madness. To them, he was just a man who had found a shortcut into a bed and a paycheck. The mockery was bearable. Noah had lived with being invisible for 7 years. Being a villain was just a different kind of isolation. What was unbearable was the collateral damage. At the Orbital Primary Academy, The atmosphere was less passive-aggressive and more primal. Children, unlike adults, lacked the sophistication of veiled insults. They went straight for the jugular. Grace sat in the back of her history class, her small hands adjusting her glasses nervously. The teacher, a holographic projection of a stern historian, was droning on about the Treaty of the First Contact. Grace usually loved history. It was logical, linear, and documented. Today, however, a digital note flickered onto her desk screen. "Ask your dad how much the alien pays him." Grace swiped the note away. Another appeared. "Does your dad wear a collar?" She bit her lip. She looked 2 rows ahead, where a boy named Jax was snickering with his friends. Jax was 12, big for his age, and possessed the cruelty of someone who repeated everything his unhappy parents said at the dinner table. When the lunch bell rang, Grace tried to retreat to the library. It was her sanctuary. But Jax and his crew cut her off in the corridor near the airlock displays. "Hey, Hart!" Jax jeered, blocking her path. "My dad says your dad is a fraud. He says no human can hear the station. He says your dad is just pretending so he can get close to that cat lady's money." "It is not money," Grace said, her voice shaking, but her chin held high. "It is resonance. My father has hypersensitive auditory processing. It is a neurological condition." "Neurological condition," Jax laughed, looking at his friends. "That means he is brain damaged, right? Like father, like daughter. Maybe that is why your mom went to Mars, to get away from the freaks." The world seemed to stop spinning for Grace. The hum of the ventilation, the chatter of students, the beep of the door locks, it all faded into a white-hot ringing silence. Grace did not think. She did not calculate the trajectory or the mass differential. She simply launched herself. She dropped her lunchbox and tackled Jax. It was an uncoordinated, desperate lunge fueled by the fierce, protective love of a daughter who had seen her father polish a wind chime for an hour just to make it sound right. They went down in a tangle of limbs. Grace's glasses flew off. She was punching blindly, hitting shoulder-chest air. "Take it back!" she screamed. "He is a hero! He fixes things!" It took 2 teachers and a security drone to pull her off. Jax had a bloody nose, mostly from hitting the floor, but Grace looked like a feral creature, panting, her hair wild, her eyes burning with tears without her glasses. 2 hours later, Noah sat in the principal's office. The room was sterile beige and smelled of lemon-scented disinfectant, the smell of administrative disappointment. "Violence is a zero-tolerance offense, Mr. Hart," Principal Vance said, tapping a stylus on his desk. Vance was a man who looked like he had been starched into existence. "She was defending me," Noah said quietly. His work clothes were still stained with coolant. He hadn't had time to change before rushing over. He held Grace's hand. She was sitting next to him, staring at her shoes, her glasses taped at the bridge. "She attacked another student," Vance corrected. "And frankly, the provocation, while unfortunate, reflects the current climate surrounding your family." Noah looked up sharply. "My family. What does that mean?" Vance sighed, a sound of practiced pity. "Noah, people talk. Your sudden elevation in the Filari sector, it is controversial. Children hear things at home. They bring it to school. I am not saying Jax was right to taunt her, but you must understand that your choices are creating a disruptive environment for your daughter." "My choices," Noah repeated the words, tasting like acid. "You mean doing my job?" "I mean the public nature of your associations," Vance said vaguely. "Grace is suspended for 3 days. I suggest you use this time to help her de-escalate, and perhaps consider a lower profile." Walking out of the school, Noah felt the weight of the station pressing down on his shoulders. He looked at Grace. She looked so small. She had fought for him. She had thrown herself at a giant for him, and he had failed to protect her from the reason she had to fight in the first place. "I am sorry, Dad," Grace whispered as they walked to the transit tube. "I calculated that I could take him. I forgot to account for the friction coefficient of the floor." Noah stopped. He knelt down, right there on the busy walkway, ignoring the commuters stepping around them. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. "Do not apologize," he choked out. "You were brave. Braver than me. But I never want you to fight my battles, Gracie. Never. That is my job." If the human sector was a cage of whispers, the Feather Light District was a labyrinth of cold shoulders. Mira was finding that the social hierarchy of Filari teenagers was just as brutal as the human one, but with more subtle physiological cues. She sat alone in the courtyard of the Dream Garden. Usually this time of day her friends would come by for sweet buns. Today, the courtyard was empty. A group of Filari girls from the high-caste families walked by on the upper walkway. They didn't shout insults. They didn't throw things. They simply flattened their ears against their skulls and swished their tails in a specific sharp motion that translated roughly to, "I smell something rotting." It was the shun, a traditional non-verbal exclusion. Mira pretended to read her datapad. Her screen was blurry. She had spent the last 2 days deleting nasty comments from the Dream Garden's public review page. Service has declined since the owner started distracted dating. Unsafe structural modifications by unqualified personnel. Boycott, the dilution of our heritage. She knew the reviews were fake. They were all posted from IP addresses traced back to the conservative block where Elder Kethar's clan lived. But the algorithm didn't know that. The shop's rating had dropped from 4.9 stars to 3.2 in 48 hours. "It is just a glitch," Mira whispered to herself, wiping her nose. "We can fix glitches." But she looked at the empty tables in the shop. Her mother was inside, pacing back and forth, polishing the same spot on the counter, until the varnish was wearing thin. Celine looked exhausted. The spark that had ignited on the night of the showcase, the defiant pride, was being smothered by the silence of her community. Mira realized with a sinking heart that Heartbeat Orbit couldn't optimize this. There was no bug fix for prejudice. That evening, the inevitable visitation occurred. Noah had returned to the Dream Garden not to celebrate, but to check a sensor he had installed near the rear ventilation unit. He told himself it was work. In reality, he needed to see Celine to make sure she was still standing. He found her in the courtyard, staring at the bioluminescent moss. "Grace got suspended," Noah said, standing a few feet away. Celine turned her eyes wide. "What Grace? But she is the most logical child I know." "She punched a boy who called me a fraud," Noah said heavily. "And a gigolo," Celine flinched. "Oh, Noah, I am so sorry." "Mira." "She is hiding in her room," Celine admitted. "The other girls gave her the shun today. She says she doesn't care, but she has been listening to sad music for 4 hours." They stood there, two parents, watching the wreckage of their children's happiness. The connection between them, the hum of shared understanding, was still there, but now it was vibrating with pain. "I tried to fix the leak," Noah murmured. "But I think I just broke the dam." "Mr. Hart." The voice was smooth-cultured and cold. Noah turned. Elder Kethar stood at the entrance of the courtyard. He was alone, dressed in simple gray robes, stripped of his ceremonial finery. It made him look less like a priest and more like an executioner. "Elder," Celine said, stepping forward instinctively, placing herself between Kethar and Noah. "I am not here to cause a scene, Celine," Kethar said softly. "I am here to offer counsel. To the technician." He turned his gaze to Noah. It was a look of profound, weary disappointment. "You are a skilled worker, Mr. Hart," Kethar said. "I have reviewed your file. Your technical scores are impressive. But you are trying to graft steel onto a flower. You think that because you can hear the song you belong in the choir." "I am trying to keep the flower from collapsing," Noah said, his voice steady despite the trembling of his hands. "Are you?" Kethar asked. He gestured around the empty courtyard. "Look around. Since you stepped into the light, the community has fractured. Celine is isolated. Her daughter is an outcast. Your own child is fighting in the streets. Is this stability? Is this resonance? Noah swallowed hard. The words hit the exact frequency of his guilt. "We have seen this before," Kethar continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "With Mira's father. He thought love was enough. He thought he could bridge the gap. But in the end, the gap swallowed them both. He left Mr. Hart. He left because he realized that the kindest thing he could do for Celine was to remove the source of her shame." "I am not him," Noah rasped. "No," Kethar agreed. "You are worse, because he was just a man in love. You are a man who thinks he can control the station's soul. That is hubris. And hubris always claims victims." Kethar stepped closer. "Go back to your sector, Noah. Let the Falari heal our own cracks. We have survived for centuries without human advisors. If you truly care for her, let her go, before she loses everything. Again." The elder turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the moss. Noah stood frozen. The logic was flawless. Brutal, but flawless. Every day he stayed, the pressure mounted. Every day he stayed, Celine lost a customer. Mira lost a friend. Grace lost her innocence. The ghost of Titan whispered in his ear, "You touch it, you break it. You touch it, you break it." He looked at Celine. She was watching him, her face pale, waiting for him to deny it, waiting for him to fight. But Noah Hart was tired of fighting gravity. "He is right," Noah whispered. The resignation letter was short. "To the Root Keepers Guild. From Noah Hart, subject resignation of candidacy. I am withdrawing my acceptance of the technical liaison position. Upon further reflection, I do not believe I am the suitable candidate for cross-cultural integration. My presence is causing operational friction rather than resonance. I request to be reassigned to the Waste Management Maintenance Crew in Sector 4, effective immediately." He typed it on his datapad, sitting on the edge of his bed. Grace was asleep in the next room, her breathing soft and rhythmic. He stared at the send button. It felt like cutting off his own ear. For the first time in 7 years, he had felt useful. He had felt seen. He had felt loud. But looking at Grace's bruised knuckles and remembering Mira's tear-streaked face, he knew he couldn't keep the volume up. The cost was too high. He pressed send. Then he stood up. He had one more thing to do. He couldn't just vanish. He owed Celine the truth, even if it broke them both. He arrived at the Dream Garden an hour after closing. The lights were dimmed to a low, slumbering violet. Celine opened the door before he could knock. She must have sensed him, or perhaps she was waiting. "Noah," she asked, seeing his face. "What is wrong? Did something happen with Grace?" "Grace is fine," Noah said. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the threshold, half in the corridor, light, half in the shop's warmth. "I sent the letter, Celine." Celine paused. "What letter?" "To the Root Keepers. I turned down the job. I resigned." The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. Celine stared at him, her tail twitching once sharp and jerky, then going dead still. "You what?" "I asked for a transfer," Noah said, rushing the words out before his courage failed. "Back to the lower decks, waste management, night shift. I won't be coming to Sector 7 anymore." "Why?" Her voice was a whisper, dangerous and low. "Because Kethar was right," Noah said. "Look at what is happening. Grace is suspended. Mira is shunned. You are losing customers. I am a contagion, Celine. I am bringing my chaos into your life. The only way to fix it is to remove the variable causing the error. That is me. I am the error." "You are not a variable," Celine shouted. She grabbed his arm, pulling him fully into the shop. "You are a person. You are the man who hears the walls sing. How can you let an old bigot with a silver tongue talk you out of your destiny?" "It is not about destiny," Noah yelled back, pulling away. "It is about safety. I destroyed a bridge once, Celine. I watched it crumble because I was too stubborn to admit I couldn't hold it. I am not going to watch your life crumble, just because I want to play hero." "This is not Titan," Celine screamed. Her eyes were blazing with furious tears. "And I am not a bridge. I am a woman who is standing right in front of you telling you to stay. Doesn't that count for anything? Doesn't my voice count?" "It counts more than anything," Noah said, his voice breaking. "That is why I have to go. Because if I stay, they will destroy you to get to me. I can't live with that." "So you run," Celine said bitterly. "Just like him. You think you are sacrificing yourself, but you are really just protecting yourself from the pain of fighting for us." "I am protecting you from me," Noah roared. "Can't you see that I am broken, Celine? I have been broken for 7 years. I can't hold you up." "I never asked you to hold me up," Celine cried. She stepped closer, grabbing the lapels of his jacket. "I asked you to stand with me. There is a difference. I don't need a savior, Noah. I need a partner. I need someone who hears the same song I do. And you are the only one who ever has." Noah looked down at her. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to hold her and never let go. But the fear was a cold iron chain around his heart. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I have to fix this the only way I know how, by disappearing." He gently pried her hands off his jacket. "Goodbye, Celine." He turned and walked out. He didn't look back. If he had, he would have seen Celine collapse onto the floor, her tail wrapped around herself, sobbing into the silence of a shop that suddenly felt very, very empty. But they were not alone. Hidden in the shadows of the stairwell leading to the loft, 2 pairs of eyes watched the door close. Mira and Grace sat huddled together on the top step. They had heard everything. Grace was wearing her pajamas, having sneaked out of the apartment when Noah left, tracking his location via his datapad. Mira was wearing an oversized hoodie. They sat in silence for a long moment, listening to Celine's weeping below. "Adults are stupid," Grace stated. It was not an insult. It was a factual observation derived from empirical data. They optimize for avoidance rather than solution. "They are cowards," Mira sniffed, wiping her eyes on her sleeve. "He loves her. You can smell it. It smells like ozone and burnt sugar. But he is leaving because that old fossil Kethar scared him." "Kethar used psychological warfare," Grace analyzed. "He exploited Dad's pre-existing trauma regarding the Titan incident. It was a highly effective tactical strike." "So that is it?" Mira asked, looking at Grace. "We just let them be miserable. My mom goes back to talking to teapots and your dad goes back to fixing toilets." Grace pushed her glasses up her nose. Her eyes, usually calm and analytical, were hard as diamonds. "Negative," Grace said. "This outcome is unacceptable. We need to introduce a new variable." "What kind of variable?" Grace pulled out her small, battered datapad. "When they were arguing, Dad said something. He said he destroyed a bridge because he was arrogant. But earlier at the listening circle, the root keepers said his old designs were brilliant. There is a data discrepancy." "And," Mira added, her tail twitching with sudden recall, "when I was doing my history project on the song spine last year, I saw the original blueprints in the station archive. The restricted section, the signature on the core resonance dampeners, wasn't a Falari name." "What was it?" Grace asked. "It was just initials," Mira said. "NH and a date, 20 years ago." Grace did the math instantly. "Dad is 35. 20 years ago, he would have been 15. "Too young to be an architect," Mira said. "But not too young to be a prodigy," Grace countered. "He said he has heard the station since he was a kid. What if he didn't just fix things? What if he helped build the song spine?" Mira's eyes widened. "If he built it, then he belongs here. More than Kethar. More than anyone." "We need proof," Grace said, standing up. "We need the original manifests. The ones Kethar probably buried." "The archives are locked at night," Mira said. "Security level 4. Grace pulled a small, modified decoding tool from her pajama pocket. It looked suspiciously like a repurposed garage door opener. My dad is the best technician on the station. I learned a few things. Can you navigate the ventilation shafts? Mira grinned, her sharp teeth glinting in the dark. I am a cat, Grace. Ventilation shafts are my natural habitat. Then let's go, Grace said. Operation Fix the Parents is a go. 3 hours later, deep in the dust-choked physical archives of Sector 1, the two girls were covered in grime and triumph. They sat on the floor, surrounded by stacks of holographic data crystals and old-fashioned paper blueprints. Here, Grace whispered, shining her flashlight on a faded document. Project Songspine. Phase 1. Core Frequency Modulation. She pointed to the bottom of the page. There, scrawled in messy, youthful handwriting, was a note: the choral hums in C major. If we use a standard alloy, it will shatter. We need to use a harmonic damper set to the biological rhythm. Suggested frequency 432 Hz. Noah H. Intern. Below it was a stamp: rejected. High Council of Architecture. But there was another document dated 3 months later. Emergency repair log. Structure failing. Implementation of intern solution. Authorized by Chief Engineer. Stabilization achieved. He saved it, Mira whispered. He didn't just build it. He saved it before it was even finished. And they buried the report because they didn't want to admit a 15-year-old human intern fixed their masterpiece. And look at who signed the rejection, Grace said, pointing to a swirling Filari signature. Mira squinted. She recognized that seal. It was on every scroll in the temple. Kethar, she hissed. He knows, Grace said. He has always known. That is why he hates Dad. Not because Dad is human, but because Dad was right 20 years ago and Kethar was wrong. Dad is living proof of Kethar's incompetence. He is gaslighting my mom, Mira said, her fur standing on end. He is gaslighting the whole sector. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered. A PA system crackled to life. Attention citizens. The Root Keepers Guild announces an emergency open forum. A listening circle will be held tomorrow at noon in the Grand Atrium. Agenda: the resignation of Noah Hart and the future of the Songspine maintenance. All voices are welcome. Mira and Grace looked at each other. A listening circle, Mira said. That is where anyone can speak, even kids. If we show this data, Grace said, clutching the blueprint, we don't just clear Dad's name, we blow Kethar out of the airlock. Metaphorically. Metaphorically, Mira agreed, a wicked grin spreading across her face. But if he cries, I won't be sad. Grace stood up, dusting off her pajamas. We have 12 hours to prepare our case. We need to organize the evidence. We need charts and snacks. If the adults won't speak the truth, Mira said, grabbing the stack of evidence, then we will scream it. As they crept out of the archives, the first light of dawn was breaking over the gas giant outside. The station hummed around them, a low, mournful song of D minor. But for the first time, the girls heard something else in the noise. They heard the potential for a major chord resolution. They just had to survive the next 12 hours. The Grand Atrium of Sector 7 was not a courtroom. It was a cathedral of biology and steel. The ceiling was a transparent dome, looking out into the swirling, violent storms of the gas giant below, while the floor was a lattice of living coral that hummed against the soles of the feet. This was the point where the Songspine emerged from the deep infrastructure, a massive spiraling trunk of glowing resonance that anchored the entire district. In the center of the atrium sat the listening circle. It was an ancient tradition older than the station itself, brought from the Filari homeworld. There were no judges, only witnesses. Noah Hart sat on a low stool in the center of the circle. He wore his gray work coveralls. He had packed his bags that morning. His resignation was already in the system pending final approval. He was only here because Halloway, the head of the Root Keepers, had physically blocked the exit to the transit tube and told him that if he wanted to leave, he had to look the station in the eye one last time. Celine sat across from him, her face composed but pale. She wore no ceremonial robes today, just her simple shop apron, a statement that she was here as a worker, not a symbol. Surrounding them were hundreds of people. There were Falari elders in high collars, human dock workers in exoskeletons, shopkeepers' teachers, and the curious who had heard the rumors. Elder Kethar sat in the front row, his posture rigid, his hands resting on his knees like stone carvings. "We begin," Holloway announced, his voice amplified, not by speakers, but by the natural acoustics of the choral chamber. The listening circle is convened to discuss the structural integrity of Sector 7 and the resignation of technician Noah Hart. Holloway gestured to a large, holographic display hovering above the song spine. "You all know the rumors," Holloway said, his voice gruff. "You have heard that Mr. Hart is an opportunist, a tourist, a man who used an algorithm to climb a social ladder. But the root keepers do not listen to rumors. We listen to data." The hologram flickered to life. It showed a 3D wireframe of the Featherlight District. It was covered in thousands of tiny glowing gold dots. Each dot, Holloway explained, represents a maintenance ticket closed by Noah Hart in the last 6 months. A Titan bolt, a recalibrated valve, an aligned sensor. He tapped a key. The dots connected. A collective gasp went through the room. The lines did not form a random scatter of repairs. They formed a web, a perfect symmetrical lattice that mirrored the internal structure of the song spine itself. It was a secondary nervous system, built bolt by bolt, keeping the sector alive. "He did not just fix things," Elder Vol, the female Falari rootkeeper, added softly. "He was knitting. Every adjustment he made was to support the weight of the Falari architecture against the human steel frames. He has been holding this sector together with nothing but a wrench and his own 2 hands." Noah looked at the floor. He felt a lump in his throat. He had never looked at it like that. He just fixed what sounded wrong. "It is a pretty picture," Elder Kethar spoke up, remaining seated, but commanding the room with his voice. "But it changes nothing. A human mechanic can follow a pattern. It does not mean he understands the soul of the design. It does not mean he belongs in the heart of our culture. We need a conductor who knows the music, not a janitor who sweeps the stage." A murmur of agreement rippled through the older Falari. "He doesn't just know the music," the shout came from the back of the room. The crowd turned. Grace and Mira stood there. Grace was holding a heavy, dusty box of physical files, and Mira was holding a portable projector. They looked tired, their clothes smudged with archive dust, but their eyes were burning with the fierce, terrifying determination of children who have realized adults are lying. "Let them speak," Celine said, standing up. "This is a listening circle. Even the smallest voices count." Grace marched into the center of the circle. She dropped the box on the floor with a heavy thud. "My father," Grace announced, her lisp vanishing under the weight of her anger, "is not a janitor. And he is not just a mechanic. We accessed the deep storage archives of Sector 1 last night." "That is a restricted area," Kethar snapped. "The truth should not be restricted," Mira shot back, her tail lashing. She set up the projector. "We found the original design logs for the song spine, from 20 years ago, when the station was just being built." The hologram shifted. It displayed a yellow digital scan of an old blueprint. It was a complex schematic for the harmonic dampeners, the very organs that allowed the song spine to exist without shattering from the station's engine vibrations. "The lead architect was Falari," Grace explained, pointing to a signature. "But the harmonic calculations, the math that actually made it work, kept failing. The coral kept cracking in the simulations." She swiped to the next image. It was a handwritten note, scrawled in the margins of a failed test. "The frequency is wrong. The coral breathes in C major. We are forcing it into a binary grid. We need to detach the dampeners and let them float. Set the counter vibration to 432 Hz. "The chief engineer approved this change," Grace said. "And it worked. It saved the project. But look at the signature on the note. She zoomed in. NH, intern, age 15. The room went dead silent. Everyone looked at the screen, then at Noah. Noah closed his eyes. He could feel the memory washing over him, the smell of the drafting office, the arrogance of being young and brilliant, the feeling that he could hear the universe's secrets. Noah Hart, Mira said, her voice trembling. You didn't just find the song. You wrote it. You helped build the song spine when you were just a kid. Celine turned to Noah. Her hand covered her mouth. Noah, is this true? Noah stood up slowly. His knees popped. He looked at the blueprint, then at the song spine pulsing gently beside him. I was an intern, Noah said, his voice raspy. A prodigy. They called me the resonant boy. I could hear stress fractures in materials before the sensors could. I thought I was invincible. He looked at the crowd. But then Titan happened. 5 years later. I was a lead engineer on the Colony Bridge. I heard the wind shear. I heard the metal groaning. But the sensors said it was safe. The data said it was safe. So I ignored the noise in my head. I trusted the machine instead of the song. He took a breath, his hands shaking. The bridge fell. 12 people died. After that, I swore I would never be responsible for a structure again. I swore I would never trust my hearing again. I buried my past. I buried the boy who designed things. I just wanted to be the man who tightened screws. He looked at Celine, his eyes pleading. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. I helped build this place, yes, but I broke myself doing it. The silence in the atrium was heavy, but it was not hostile. It was the silence of awe. The opportunist narrative had just been shattered. Noah wasn't an invader. He was a founding father who had returned home. And there is one more thing, Grace said, her voice hard. She pointed a finger at Elder Kethar. We found a request from the Root Keepers dated 3 years ago. They wanted to hire a resident specialist. The algorithm suggested Noah Hart based on his anonymous maintenance scores. But someone blocked the hiring. Mira flashed a new document on the screen. It was a rejection order. Reason for rejection, cultural incompatibility. We do not need a human to tell us how our heart beats. Signed, Elder Kethar. The crowd turned to Kethar. The elder sat stone-faced, but his fingers were gripping his robe so tightly the fabric was tearing. You knew, Mira accused him. You knew who he was. You recognized his work. And you buried it because you hate humans more than you love the song spine. I protected our heritage, Kethar stood up, his voice booming. Look at him. He is broken. He admits it. Do you want a broken man holding the life of our sector in his hands? Yes, I blocked him. Because Falari culture must remain pure. We cannot rely on the transient genius of a species that destroys everything it touches. Enough. The word was not shouted, but it cut through the air like a blade. Celine stepped into the center of the circle. She stood between Noah and Kethar. She looked small between the two men, but she radiated a heat that felt like a star. Purity, Celine said, tasting the word like sour milk. You talk of purity, Elder, but look at the song spine. She pointed to the massive glowing structure. It is coral grafted onto steel. It is biology fused with technology. It is a hybrid. It is strong because it is not pure. It is strong because it learned to embrace the best of both worlds. She turned to the crowd, her eyes, finding the faces of her neighbors who had shunned her. You called Noah a tourist. You said he would leave. You said he was just another human passing through. But look at the map. She pointed to the constellation of gold dots. While you were whispering, he was working. While you were judging, he was fixing the floor you stand on. He has been more faithful to this sector in silence than many of you have been in your loud prayers. She turned to Noah. She reached out and took his hand. His palm was rough, calloused, and shaking. She squeezed it. He is broken, Celine said clearly. Yes, and so am I. My heart was broken by a man who left. His spirit was broken by a bridge that fell. We are all cracked vessels. But that is how the light gets in. She looked deep into Noah's eyes. He does not need to be a savior. I do not need him to be perfect. I just need him to be the one who stays. And he has been staying every day in the dark, where no one clapped for him. Noah, she whispered for his ears only. You wrote the song. Do you really want to stop singing it? Noah looked at her. He looked at Grace, who was beaming with pride. He looked at Mira, who was crying happy tears. He looked at the song spine. He closed his eyes and listened. He heard the D minor hum. It was waiting. It was waiting for the counter note. Noah opened his eyes. He looked at Kethar. I am not resigning, Noah said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to the back of the dome. I am withdrawing my application for waste management, Noah continued, standing taller. I am accepting the position of technical liaison, but I have conditions. He looked at the route keepers. I will not do it from an office. I will not wear a suit. I stay in the field. I keep my wrench. And I answer to the station, not to the council. He turned to Kethar. And I don't want your apology, Elder. I just want you to step aside, because I have a job to do and you are standing on a loose floorboard. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It broke the tension. Holloway stepped forward. The route keepers accept these terms. And as for the council, he looked at Kethar. The guild controls technical appointments. The cultural veto is suspended. Indefinitely. Kethar looked around. He saw the faces of his people. They were not looking at him with reverence anymore. They were looking at Noah, the human who had built their heart. The elder smoothed his robes. He maintained his dignity, but his power had evaporated like mist. Then on your head be it, he muttered, and walked out of the circle. This time, no one followed him. The applause started slowly. It began with the young baker, whose floor Noah had fixed. Then the welder who had mocked him in the mess hall stood up and clapped. Then Grace and Mira. And then the whole atrium was thundering. Celine didn't clap. She just held Noah's hand, anchoring him to the earth as the waves of sound washed over them. Epilogue. 3 months later. The Featherlight District was preparing for the season of high tides. The station's orbit was bringing it close to the gas giant's magnetic poles, causing the auroras to dance wildly outside the viewports. The Dream Garden was packed. There was a line out the door. Table 4 needs a refill on the star nectar, Mira shouted, balancing a tray of pastries. She was wearing a new apron that said, Assistant Manager Chaos Coordinator. On it, Grace called back. She was sitting at the counter doing her homework, but occasionally dispensing logical advice to customers who were complaining about their love lives. Statistically, if he has canceled 3 times, the probability of him being a soulmate is less than 4%, Grace told a weeping Falari teenager. Eat a cookie. It increases serotonin. Celine moved through the shop like a dancer. She looked tired, but it was the good kind of tired, the exhaustion of success. She placed a pot of tea on a table and glanced at the door. The chime rang. It wasn't a customer. It was Noah. He was wearing his work coveralls, smeared with bioluminescent algae from the lower filtration units. He looked exhausted, his hair a disaster, dark circles under his eyes. He walked in, and the chatter in the shop didn't stop. No one stared. No one whispered. He was just Noah, the liaison, the guy who fixed things. He walked up to the counter. Hey, he said. Hey, Celine replied, sliding a cup of iron root tea across the wood before he even asked. Long shift. The hydration pumps in Sector 3 were singing a funeral dirge, Noah said, taking a long sip. It took me 6 hours to convince them to switch to a waltz, Celine smiled. Did you eat? I had a ration bar. That is not food. That is compressed sadness, Celine scolded. Go sit. I saved you a sweet bun. Noah didn't sit immediately. He watched her. So I was looking at the calendar. Oh. Grace has a school break next month, and the route keepers owe me about 3 weeks of vacation time. Celine stopped wiping the counter. And, and I heard the surface of the moon Titan II has a really nice resort. Dome covered. Quiet. No structural anomalies reported in 10 years. Noah scratched the back of his neck, suddenly shy. I thought maybe we could go. All four of us. Unless you are too busy. Celine looked at Mira and Grace. The girls were pretending not to listen, which meant they were listening intently. A family vacation, Celine mused. With a human technician and 2 delinquents. We are not a traditional family, Noah admitted. No, Celine agreed. She reached across the counter and brushed a smudge of grease from his cheek. We are a hybrid, just like the station. Is that a yes? That is a yes, but you are not allowed to fix the hotel plumbing. I make no promises, Noah grinned. He drank his tea, the warmth spreading through his chest, silencing the last remnants of the old anxiety. As he turned to leave for his final rounds, he stopped at the door. The wind chime, the bone and crystal one, was hanging slightly askew again. A draft from the busy evening had twisted the cord. Noah reached up. Celine, watching him, stepped out from behind the counter. She walked over to him. It is listing to the left, Noah murmured, his hand hovering over the bone. Then let us balance it, Celine said. She reached up too. Her slender, violet hand covered his large, scarred one. Together, they adjusted the counterweight. They shifted the knot. They didn't just fix it. They tuned it. Better, Celine asked, looking up at him. Noah looked at the chime, then at the woman standing in the circle of his arms. He listened to the hum of the station, the chaos, the noise, the life. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But for the first time in 20 years, the song in his head was a harmony. Perfect, Noah said. He kissed her right there in the doorway beneath the singing bones and the watching stars. And outside, under the glow of the gas giant, the sign above the shop flickered, once then buzzed steady and bright, fixed by hands that had finally learned to hold on without breaking.